y'all, it's Hope at Crafty Hope. Welcome! It is time for my week 22, oh my gosh, mixed media prompt card. So this is a project I created. I'm calling it Crafty Hope Prompts, and that's the hashtag below in the title. And basically, I'm building up a prompt deck and pulling 3 prompts a week, altering a playing card with the prompts that I pull, and then later in the week on Saturday, I'm using those same 3 prompts to do a larger project. You are invited to play along. You can use the prompts that I pull, or I've got a list of 156 prompts below. Yeah, and you can make anything. You can go ahead and do your own prompt deck, or you can just do an altered playing card, or an ATC, or a tag, or an art journal page, junk journal page, jewelry, whatever is calling out to you, whatever those prompts say to you, go for it. There are quite a few people playing along. Some of them, a lot of them are just doing cards. Some are doing journals. There are, yeah, I've got a lot of people. I appreciate y'all playing along, and as a thanks for the people playing along and subscribing and tuning in, I have a giveaway going on. So this past Saturday's prompt project, I created this tag using this week's prompts, and if you'll go watch that video and make a comment letting me know that you are interested in the giveaway, I will do a drawing. Please get that comment in by March 2nd of 2023. Anything after that, and I'm on Central Time, so anything after that I'm not going to be able to accept, because on Saturday, was it 2, 3, 4, I think, March 4th, I will be announcing the giveaway winner with that project. So whatever prompts we draw today, that project's video, I'll have that. Anyway, okay, I hope I have explained all of that very well. I encourage you to go also check out any of the videos. I've got a playlist that'll be at the end of the cards and the projects. So I am ready to draw week 22's prompts and see what we are going to be working with. If I can get all of these cards. There we go. Okay, so let's open my container with my prompts. And I'm trying to stir them up. Make sure not too many are stacked. Okay, here is one. And oh no, work upside down. Alright, so that's something anybody can do. That just means that once I figure out the orientation of my card, I'm going to have to turn it upside down and at least for a portion of it work upside down. That shouldn't be too hard if I do doodles or something like that, much like the non-dominant hand. I just have a different orientation. So that's a pretty easy one for just about anybody. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Shouldn't be too hard. All right, the next prompt, make sure that's just one, is going to be embossing powder. All right, so I could be embossing upside down. That I have a nice collection of embossing powders. I have only bought a couple of them. The rest have either been given to me by my sister-in-law or my brother-in-law's mother. So yeah, families have blessed me with lots of embossing powders. I also have ice, what is it called? It's not ice resin. It's done by Susan Lennart Kasmer, who did ice resin, but it's the powders that melt like an embossing powder. Iced enamels, that's what they are. So I'm including that in this embossing powder prompt. If you don't have embossing powder, I'm trying to think other alternatives. I really don't know, because embossing powder tends to be used with stamps. So you could just do a stamped, or you could just do some embossing if you have embossing and accentuate that in some manner. If you don't have an embossing machine, maybe use a stencil and rub over that with like a popsicle stick or something to get an embossed effect. So just kind of think about those things, that if you don't have these things, or even just draw your own prompts this week, you know? All right, those are 2. Let's go for one more. Let me see, I'm trying to put it where I don't see it. This one is scrapbook or pattern paper. That shouldn't be too hard. I have lots of scrapbook papers, pattern papers, and I do need to use them. So that will probably be my base layer for my card. All right, guys, I guess I need to go grab some of these things and come right back and we will get started on these. Oh my goodness, y'all, I've totally failed to mention what you can use for scrapbook or pattern paper if you don't have it. So first off, scrapbook pattern paper, what comes in either, there's 12 by 12, 8 by 8, 6 by 6 pads, or individually at a craft store. Scrapbook paper, easy. Pattern paper, you could even use something as simple as like a notebook paper with lines that has a pattern on it. But you could also create your own patterns by taking a white sheet of copy paper and doing some stamps or drawing some lines or some other kind of pattern on it. So that is all of that. What I have gathered, first off, work upside down. That's, I don't have to gather anything for that. Embossing powder. I did get my bucket of embossing powders and pads and all of these things that, most of which I don't know what to do with. So yes, I inherited almost all of these. So then for scrapbook or pattern paper, I decided to work. Scrapbook paper tends to be kind of thick cardstocky a lot of times, so I grabbed these. I'm mentioning Susan Lennart Kasmer again. This is the, where is it? These are some of the iced enamels that she makes. So those could be used. But she also came out with these books. You can see I found them at Tuesday morning, and the paper themselves are really a lot thinner than scrapbook papers, and they've got these great patterns. Can you see that on the back of some of them? And so I thought, since these are a thinner material, they might be nice. And you can see like this pattern here is just about, where'd my card go? It's just about like card sized. So I may work with some of those. I just like her papers. So that is my idea for now. I'm going to get these things put up, make sure I keep them in order. And we'll get started on this in just a minute. As I mentioned, I decided to start with those pattern papers from Susan Lennart Kasmer. And I'm flipping through trying to find a good pattern. I mean, there are lots of great images in there because they're intended for like resin pieces. But what I wanted was like a definite pattern to go with that pattern paper, and something I knew I probably wouldn't use in my jewelry in some way. So I'm finding just patterns that I like, and I decided to dip into a second one, and I'm pulling out two since I've got a back and a front to these cards. Where, y'all, I'm trying to concentrate. Since I've got a back and a front, I decided I wanted to get two different pages, basically give myself a little variety. And I'm using that acrylic matte medium and the little facial mask spreader, and just putting that down. I kind of hate that I didn't look because I wanted the back side of that paper, and I covered up. There was like a neat image, but it's not a big deal, y'all. It's not something I probably would have used in any other way. But always check both sides of your papers to see if like how you want to use them. So all right, so I am using a ruler just to tear the edge because I did put down my card against two edges, so I only have to tear it in two places. Woohoo! Look at me. And while that pattern is neat that's on there, I knew I needed just a little bit more texture, so I'm going to just tear off a piece of one edge and put that down. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And in a minute, y'all, I've got to change the underpaper I've got going on my desk right now. It is crazy because I'm going to turn this over, and I think it picks up some things that are on my desk, and it's okay, but it doesn't keep true to the pattern that's on that side. So, but my bad. I need to change out that paper more often. It's getting harder for y'all to see too what I'm doing, I'm sure, with all that chaos that's there. So I'm pulling out that other whole piece of that paper. You saw doing the same kind of thing, putting down that matte medium, and then tearing it off. And then I'll put down, I think, I'm trying to remember which paper I end up using. I'm going to go ahead and trim it. Yeah, there is a little bit of excess that needs to come off, but you can see those are really subtle patterns. So I will pull out, something else from the other pages to put down just for, so I've got lots of pattern paper, layering it. And that's all of the collaging I'm actually going to do on these, which surprised me. But, there's a lot going on because I knew I needed to also use embossing in some way. And I didn't want the background to be too crazy so that the embossing didn't stand out. But yeah, all of these things are not my forte. You know, that's part of the reason I have these cards, these prompts, is to make myself use these things that don't get used, because I'm not always sure the best way to use them. I guess that's the thing. So I did add another little piece of paper for contrast on one of the sides. I wasn't sure quite yet which side's going to be my decorative side and which side's going to be my functional side. I was flipping through my prompts, trying to remember, okay, what else do I need to do? And I'm going to go ahead and admit to y'all that the work upside down prompt was probably the hardest prompt on here for me. Yeah, so we'll get to that in a bit. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and pull out some of my embossing things. I kind of wanted to try using clear embossing powder to retain the papers in the background and then add things to the top of it. And it's not something I normally do, so I'm not sure I'm doing it right. If this is something you know how to do, to use the embossing powder as a resist. I think one of my main problems is this tinted embossing, I don't even know what you call it, pad. It's a pink pad, and I'm using one of my hand carved stamps that has a nice blocky petal or propeller type design. And that pink pad, I don't know, it's old, and it's overly juicy or something. But when I stamp the stamp on there, that pink goes on there, which is nice because you know where you put your embossing powder, or where you put your stamping. But that pink didn't go away when I emboss it with this clear embossing powder. So I've got, and it's not a huge deal. It kind of added a little bit of color that this card needed, but it was interesting. So now I'm adding that, I think it's a Ranger clear embossing powder. It's not the UT, I'm not sure. Again, I think it's something somebody gave me. So I sprinkled that on my card, and then I'm going to get rid of that excess powder, put it back in that jar. That's why I'm working on a folder, because it's got that natural bend. That's just kind of my go-to. Any paper that you can fold like that would work fine. And now you heat it. So if you haven't used embossing powders, once you heat them, they kind of melt and become like a plastic. And I'm showing you this whole heating process because you can kind of see where they get shiny in here. Do you see that, where it starts to get shiny? And I let it cool for a second before I handled it, because you have to make sure that it gets super hot so it'll melt and become that little bit of a pattern. But you can see the pink is still there a little bit. And I was just trying to roll with it. So at this point, I looked at the work upside down, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. Let me go ahead and add some things on top of this clear embossing powder. So I grabbed my coffee because I know I like how it picks up texture and all of that. And I reconstituted it, and I'm just using a paintbrush to paint kind of not exactly around where I embossed, but enough on the card that it was on where I embossed. And now I'm trying to wipe away the coffee from on top of the embossing. And that worked great. So I went ahead and dried the coffee just slightly so I didn't remelt the embossing powder. And I'm using a baby wipe now to wipe back the coffee. And can you see how it just wiped right off of that? So it kind of acted as a resist there, but I still don't think I'm doing it the most effectively. So I would love your embossing powder tips when it comes to some of this. But like I said, it's not something I do often. So that side was befuddling me a little. So I was like, okay, let's flip it over and do the other side, and we'll try a colored embossing powder. So I've got this Ledger Script stamp from Tim Holtz. I think that is a Verdigris Distress, or maybe it's called Patina. If I can find it, I'll put it below. But it's an embossing powder that kind of looks like a patina. And I'm using this other stamp to do the embossing, and I guess it's white. I don't know, y'all. It just came with all of this embossing stuff that I was given. And so I'm going to stamp that script stamp over the whole of my card and pick it up, and I can't see it at all because it's white or clear or whatever. Oh, and you can see after I put those embossing inks onto my stamps, I do clean them off with a baby wipe because I don't want them to be like sticky or whatever. All right, and now goes the embossing powder over the whole thing. I'm going to shake it off, and I can actually see where it went. So I was like, "Ooh, okay, it did go on there," because I was super concerned. And I'll get rid of this excess and clean it up, and then go ahead and emboss that side. Now, do you already see my problem here? I'm going to heat this up so that the embossing powder melts, which means it is so hot that the embossing powder on the other side remelts, and ends up sticking somewhat to my paper, under paper. And it's not a huge deal because it ended up not messing it, but I could have really messed something up. But that's where I realized it. I was like, oh no, Hope. So I should have maybe done it on my collage paper and then put that onto the card instead of embossing something on both sides. So and I did all of that upside down. I wanted to mention I did my stamping and everything else. If you notice, I worked it upside down. But I splashed some coffee on there, and I dry it just a little so I don't remelt everything. And while it's still a little bit wet, I'm going to hit it with my distress sprayer and get that coffee to move around, and then I leave it to air dry so that I'm not reheating anything again. And y'all, I left it sitting on my desk for about a day and a half because I was like, I don't know what to do with this card. I don't know. So I looked at it for a bit and ended up pulling out this little, I don't know, scrapbook element stamp with flowers on it. And I'm going to ink the edges with walnut stained distress ink. And then I've got this piece of, it's a drop cloth of some kind that I stamped on one side, but only on a portion of it. So I'm going to end up turning it over and using it upside down. And I am working on my card upside down. That stamp is upside down so the top of the card is facing me, like is at the bottom here. And then the bottom is up at the top, if that makes sense. So I decided I wanted to do some slow stitching on that little piece of drop cloth, and grabbed a color that I thought would complement the patina embossing I had done. And I am going to, I'm going to thread my needle and tie a knot on the end and do just slow stitching. I'm going to do 3 lines of slow stitching on there, and I'm going to work it upside down. So I'll be working from the back of the fabric. The fabric that I had the stamping on is what I'm going to consider the back. So I'm starting there, putting it in, making sure my knot is right there. And I am going to work it so I cannot see what the front of this fabric looks like. So that's one way to think of working upside down. The benefit of working upside down is to give you a different perspective of your piece so that when you are working with it, you kind of see it from all angles and not just the correct angle. It just gives you a different perspective on things, so you can see different colors or how things are moving and how your eyes move around on your card or your page or your tag or whatever you're working on. So I was given doing this slow stitching from the back side, and I'm just making sure that when I do these lines of stitches that my short stitches basically are on the back side and the longer stitches are on the front. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. And I'm also making sure that at each end I'm coming up toward me, so it's on that back side, so that when I start again I'm going into the front. And this worked out really nicely. It kind of makes me want to do more slow stitching from the back side. Sometimes you might even like the backs more than you like the fronts if you work it upside down or backwards like I am here. So I'm going to finish this up. This is my 3rd row here. And again, I'm going to make sure I end coming out toward me. Oh, I had to back up a little bit because I had made my long stitches on the top at that time. So I backed up my needle before I pulled it, and I'm ending there, making sure my fabric's straight. I'm going to trim off that end, and then I separate some of the threads of this embroidery floss so that I can tie just a regular overhand knot. So just like you would on your shoelace. And I do a double knot here, and then I will trim it the excess of the thread. That's one of my favorite ways to end a knot, or to make a knot on the back of something. And I'll flip it over, and I'm double checking that I'm working upside down so that, because I was concerned I had turned my card the wrong way. And I think here I'm going to grab my matte gel medium. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm looking at it, trying to decide, because I'm working upside down, so it all feels a little weird. And I felt like it was too pale and needed a spot of black. And I really probably should have gone darker, or something that would dry darker, like maybe an ink or something. But I went with my Stabilo All, scribbled it on my table, and then just splashed some of it on the card to give me that little touch of black. But it ended up being more gray. It's okay. It's fine. I just knew I needed something darker on there. So now I've got the matte gel medium and a paintbrush, and I'm going to put that on the back of my fabric. Excuse me. And like I said, I'm working upside down. I don't know how this at all is. I'd never turned it the right way, so I have no idea how this is going to turn out. So it's kind of a neat little surprise for me. So here's my little stamp. And again, I'm putting it upside down. So where I'm putting it at the top, that's going to be the bottom of my card. And I'm going to weigh it down while I go to look for a sentiment. And I've got these little words I cut out, and I found one that says, "Oh, happy day." And I thought that was kind of perfect for that beautiful little stamp and how gentle and that card feels. So I'm going to ink up the edges of that, and then use my matte gel also to glue it down. And from there, I think I'm just going to ink the edges of this card to finish it off. It's, yeah, on this side anyway. I've still got to do the functional side. This is just my decorative side. And it's still, oh, I think I'm going to add a little bit more of that Stabilo splatter on there too, because it's still, I covered up a lot of it with my fabric. So here's inking the edges. And yeah, which y'all, I'm glad I remembered to start doing this again. This is totally like something that just finishes up. Okay, so now I'm turning it around. That is the first time I get a good look at it right side up. And like I said, it's a little pale, it's a little subdued, but it still makes it very sweet. So I'm kind of happy with that. I just needed a little more of the black splatter. And I'm going in just a couple places with it. And then, yeah, do I even dry it? I'm not sure. We're going to see, because I just did this. All right, so I'm flipping over to the other side, and again, I'm going to try to work upside down because I haven't really done anything upside down on this one. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim down my prompts, since that is my prompt side. And I'm got my chunky pencil there. I wanted some movement on this side, so I just scribbled around on that. And that looked great, but I wanted a little bit more dark, so I'll grab my Dollar Tree rollerball pen. And again, going around, and you can see where it's kind of skipping over where that embossing is. So that's kind of neat. And I will, yeah, I'm going to add a little bit of water to those scribbles just to get it a little more grungy. And I end up liking, y'all, I'm so happy with this card. I told you I had to leave it for a day and a half because I was just befuddled by it. And I end up really, really liking this card. So I'm glad I stepped away for a minute and rethought about it. So I took my Distress Oxide in black soot that just happened to be sitting there and inked those edges. And I dried it, but just real quick because I didn't want to melt anything. And now I'm using that walnut stain again and that dauber tool to ink all the edges of my, y'all, I've gone edge inking crazy. So yeah, be prepared, but it does really add such a finished look to everything. So I'm making all the edges of my prompts and laying them down on my card, and then I will use my Oohoo glue stick to glue those prompts down. And again, this I'm doing all upside down. And I really like the perspective it gave me. It made me feel like I wasn't trying to read the words, but it was looking at those strips of paper to make sure everything was straight and lined up and all of that, rather than looking at the actual like letters and words and reading it. So that was, that change of perspective is really great. Once I get these all glued down, I will turn it right side up just to add my number 22 in the upper right corner because, yeah, I didn't think I could write 22 upside down. Not where I wanted it. And that is it for this card. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Sorry it was so much of a struggle. If you're playing along, make sure you use those prompts, Crafty Hope, that tag, Crafty Hope prompts, and tag me. Goodness. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, give me a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe, and I will see y'all very soon with a project for these 3 prompts. Bye, y'all.